The Highlands kept their secrets beneath a raw grey sky, but inside Balmoral every ticking mantle clock felt suddenly, painfully loud. Doctors had left the king's chambers only minutes earlier, faces tight, words clinical, verdict unmistakable. The latest therapy had faltered, options were narrowing, the timeline once whispered in months might now be counted in single-digit weeks. Within that fraught hush Princess Anne strode down the carpeted passage, summoned as the one sibling Charles trusted to hear everything and leak nothing. On the other side of the oak door she found him sitting upright, a faint tremor in his hand, briefing folders arrayed like chess pieces around the bed. To her shock, he began not with medical regrets, but with constitutional mathematics. Time, he told her, voice steady, no longer permits gradualism. In one breath he outlined the future. Catherine would be named Queen Consort at the instant of his death. William would assume not only the crown, but immediate stewardship of a drastically slim civil list. And Lady Louise, shy, thoughtful Lady Louise, must be elevated now, before public grief turned into public doubt. Anne knew it wasn't a proposal. It was a decision, and there was no guarantee how many dawns remained to implement it. She carried that volcanic decree to the family war room before sunrise, where advisors juggled protocol manuals and cups of scalding tea. The mood? Think orchestra tuning up just as the theatre roof begins to creak. Secure calls went out, William in Windsor, Sophie in Bagshot, Camilla still asleep one wing away. By mid-morning the drawing room looked like a living family portrait gone slightly wrong, faces blanched, eyes red-rimmed, dignity wobbling under the weight of shock. And there, at the center, Princess Anne delivered the line that detonated generations of precedent. His Majesty's final wish is that Catherine assume the full title of Queen Consort upon accession. Hooks sank deep in every heart. How would Camilla respond, after decades spent rehabilitating her public image? Would William embrace the plan that poured even more pressure onto Catherine's shoulders? Could the kingdom digest such a pivot while its monarch still breathed? Camilla's reaction landed first. A single intake of breath, then a porcelain smile that failed to reach her eyes. She asked one clipped question: has the warrant been drafted? Received Anne's nod, and excused herself. Staff later found the Queen Consort alone in the music room, fingers hovering above piano keys she never struck. By lunchtime, she had summoned her private secretary, and ordered an itinerary of quieter regional visits, as though to carve out relevance before the tide turned permanent. William's turn came next, and it cracked even the palace's marble composure. Rushing through castle corridors he met Anne halfway, scanned the document, and folded at the knees, tears shearing down his cheeks. He wants Catherine, he wants us ready. The heir who once marched behind Diana's coffin found himself once more at the cliff edge of expectation, but this time the safety net was the woman he loved, and the daunting promise that the monarchy's redemption now hinged on her relatability. There was no time for a private breakdown. Lawyers began relettering patents, courtiers redrew seating charts, military equerries recalibrated precedence lists that hadn't moved in a century. And throughout, a second narrative simmered: Lady Louise Windsor's sudden propulsion from comfortable anonymity into the diplomatic furnace. Sophie, her mother, battled conflicting instincts, protective parent, loyal daughter-in-law. Louise herself listened, eyes wide but determined, as Prince William explained why a teenager's quiet sincerity might be the crown's best antidote to generations of scandal fatigue. Her acceptance came with a whisper: if it helps Grandpapa's legacy, I'll learn fast. Out beyond the castle walls, rumor outran truth like wildfire. Social feeds exploded with hashtags: #Catherine the Steady, #Queen in Waiting, #Camilla Ghosted, while breakfast table tabloids slid from speculation to near certitude. Networks dispatched satellite vans to palace gates, bookmakers froze odds on future titles, constitutional scholars filled studio panels, some praising the king's audacity, others calling it a crown-shaking gamble. Amid the frenzy, Charles himself seemed preternaturally calm. Each afternoon he summoned a different family member for private audiences. With Camilla he clasped her hand and thanked her for rescuing him from decades of personal unrest. With Sophie he praised the balanced pragmatism she would lend Catherine. With Princess Anne he simply said, "Hold them together," knowing that, in crisis, his sister's blunt fidelity was worth any brigade of courtiers. Yet the meeting with Catherine may define royal folklore for decades. She entered pale but composed, linen headscarf betraying the toll of chemotherapy. The king insisted she sit, then slid across a folder bearing his embossed cipher. "For you," he said, "because the country already sees you as its heartbeat." Witnesses outside the chamber heard no more, but when Catherine emerged, eyes shimmering, she murmured to William, "He trusts us absolutely." William replied, half broken and half bolstered, "Then we'll be worthy of it." Hooks upon hooks, would the public embrace a queen who rises before her husband even ascends? Could Camilla's gracious retreat transform into silent resentment? Whose patronages would shift? Whose budgets would vanish? Would Parliament require a fresh Regency Act to codify the accelerated roles? Downing Street sensed peril and opportunity. A prime minister bruised by domestic unrest saw in the impending transition a rallying point, modern monarchy as unifying narrative, but only if smooth. Advisers urged the king to make at least one public appearance to steady the nation. Against medical counsel Charles agreed, and so it was that on a windswept May afternoon he stepped onto a Buckingham Palace balcony, Camilla to his left, William and Catherine to his right, Louise just behind, the tableau framed deliberately for maximum symbolic charge. Cameras clicked like hail. Charles spoke only a single sentence, "Hope, service, and continuity will carry us forward," then let the silence speak volumes. That image ricocheted across headlines worldwide, but the undercurrent was bracing, a monarchy discarding caution to outrun fate. Commonwealth realms scheduled emergency cabinet briefings. Caribbean republic movements weighed fresh referenda. Australian talk shows debated whether pre-accession Queen Consort breached the spirit of their constitution. Back at Balmoral, the king's health ebbed. Some evenings he rallied, dictating personal letters to staff and reminding them the turbines' revenues must keep funding community projects. Other nights he drifted into fitful sleep, murmuring fragments of Shakespeare, and then fragments of hymns his mother once hummed during wartime blackouts. Catherine and William alternated bedside vigils with strategy workshops deep inside the castle's library, scheming how to intertwine sustainability, mental health advocacy, and digital-era transparency into the first 100 days of their eventual reign. And Camilla. She chose resolve over retreat. She invited Catherine to a private supper at Raymill House, no equerries, no formality, just two women navigating an extraordinary transfer of public affection. They walked the orchards at dusk, Camilla sharing decades-earned tips on negotiating palace power centers, Catherine promising in return that the Queen Consort's hard-won patronages would remain supported by the new team. Whether that fragile understanding holds beyond coronation pomp remains the next chapter's cliffhanger. By midsummer, final rehearsals were underway. Westminster Abbey rang, with muted organ chords, as choristers practiced anthems not heard since 1953. Military dressmakers tailored a coronation gown for Catherine designed to merge Elizabethan motifs with a whisper of modern minimalism. Louise, under Anne's tutelage, perfected her curtsy sequence and began intensive training in diplomatic small talk, 40-minute, speed receptions, with retired ambassadors posing as foreign dignitaries. Every detail aimed at one goal, a succession seamless enough to convert shock into reassurance. Yet the kingdom kept feeling for fault lines. Pollsters recorded an unprecedented 82% approval for Catherine's elevation, but a solid 28% still worried it sidelined a queen, who had endured decades of media vilification, to stand by a once unpopular prince. In Scotland, Republican sentiment ticked upward, fueled by an economic downturn that cast royal splendor in a harsher light. And across the Atlantic the Sussex narrative reignited, commentators speculating whether Harry might return, even temporarily, to support his ailing father, or whether the Californian fracture was now beyond repair. Every unresolved question became another hook. Would Harry reconcile, or would Coronation photographs freeze him out entirely? Would Camilla's resilience ultimately earn her a new respect as the monarchy's silent elder? Could Catherine's health withstand the punishing pace of the throne? And could William juggle fatherhood, global diplomacy, and the ghosts of history that once chased his mother onto Parisian asphalt? When August arrived, pounding rain gave Balmoral a dramatic send-off for its most consequential vigil. Charles, slipping in and out of lucid conversation, requested one last carriage ride around the estate. Wrapped in a tartan blanket, he watched mist drift over the River Dee and whispered to the head groom, "Tell them to shepherd, not rule." It was the mantra he had distilled from years of preaching organic stewardship and architectural harmony. Leaders are custodians, not conquerors. He returned exhausted, yet peaceful, and asked for Anne. She kissed his forehead, promised the deed was done, governance aligned, and tradition safe in evolving hands. Then she stepped into the hallway, pressed palms against ancient stone, and allowed herself a private, voiceless sob, knowing that the next breath she took would be for duty alone. That is where Britain stands tonight, monarchy balanced on a knife edge between heartbreak and renewal, an heir apparent bracing to become a reformer king, a future queen consort carrying the hopes of a modern electorate, a retiring queen who must find purpose without prominence, and a newly minted young duchess learning the art of public grace at sprint speed. Will the gamble work? History loves an audacious pivot, yet it is merciless to those who stumble. One misread cue at the coronation, one ill-timed comment from a disgruntled relation, one slip in the digital age's relentless spotlight, could unravel the king's meticulously woven legacy. But if they succeed, if Catherine's empathy and Louise's freshness harmonize with William's steady pragmatism, Charles's final wish might just inaugurate a monarchy leaner, kinder, and startlingly in step with the century rushing toward it. For now, watch the flag above Balmoral. When it falls to half-mast the nation will grieve, yes, but moments later eyes will swivel to Westminster, waiting to see whether a young family can turn seismic change into steadfast continuity. That suspense, that heartbeat between dusk and dawn, is the story's newest hook, and the world, breath held, is already leaning in.